All right, guys, we're going to get going here on Unit 4, I think this is. This unit is all about cellular energetics, and a really good introductory chapter to get us off into cellular energetics is a discussion of metabolism and the chemical reactions that make up what we are, really. It's kind of odd to say that and kind of transition it into this idea here, but when we think of ourselves as human beings, we oftentimes don't think of ourselves as walking, talking chemical reactions. Because if you think about it, that's essentially what we are. We are highly organized piles of chemicals that walk and talk and think and interact, and on top of it, there's just mountains of chemical reactions taking place within us. And so the living cell is the smallest unit of this chemical factory where thousands of reactions occur at any given nanosecond. That's the other thing we've got to realize here, is that these chemical reactions that take place within cells are ones that happen very, very quickly, and they happen at scales that we cannot fathom in terms of amounts of things, amounts of product, amounts of times that the chemical reaction actually happens, okay? And so when we think about ourselves, it's good to take a step back and think about ourselves in terms of this avenue, in terms of the fact that we are just really highly organized chemical reactions, and the fact that we can even get around and do anything on any given day is a testament to how efficient our body is at making sure these chemical reactions happen properly, because so many things could theoretically go wrong in these chemical reactions and we don't even think about it, okay? So, during these chemical reactions, the cells will extract energy and they will apply that energy to perform work and do different things and this, that, and the other. And it's all stuff that we just kind of take for granted. So that's one of the reasons that this particular unit is one of my favorites, because it gives us a really deep dive, a really deep look into exactly what our cells do to help keep us alive, and then what the conglomerate of all of our cells, the community that we call our cells in our body, what they do, with interaction with each other to kind of help our macro-sized bodies work. Now, I really like this part of the chapter because, if we were in person, I'm not going to do this here, but if we were in person, we could talk about the different ways in which some organisms actually use their energy from their chemical reactions to help them get through their lives. Some of them use their energy to convert into light, which is known as bioluminescence. And during this part of the class, I would then take 15-20 minutes out and we watch really cool videos. I can refer you to some really cool videos, but unfortunately we're just not going to be able to throw them on here. I might even be able to get them to link in the material below. So check those out and see if the links are there, and if they are, give them a watch, okay? But some organisms, like the ones you see in front of you, these bioluminescent jellyfish, they use some of their energy to actually glow. And they do this for different reasons, which the video would go into, and so it's a really interesting dive into different energetic strategies that different organisms would have. We obviously don't use our energy in our body to glow, and we don't necessarily need to, but we do use it for other things that maybe these jellyfish would think are weird, okay? We also see some of these small organisms. This is a body of water, I can't remember, somewhere tropical. It's called Bioluminescent Bay. It might be in Australia, it might be in the Caribbean, somewhere. But these little plankton will, when you agitate them, they will actually glow a certain color. And you can kind of see that here. There's a guy kind of swimming through the water, and he's moving his arms, and he's agitating these little phytoplankton, and they glow as a result. And same thing with the people down in the kayak there. They are agitating the water, which has these little organisms in it, and when they do, they glow. And so different organisms use their energy for different reasons. So hopefully I can get those links to work and throw those in there so you guys can watch those too. All right. So let's jump right into the material. An organism's metabolism transforms matter and energy subject to the laws of thermodynamics. So we'll be covering all of this stuff in this particular video right here. The metabolism is the totality of an organism's chemical reactions. So when I've spoken about metabolism before, I've said the metabolism of this organism, or my metabolism, blah, blah, blah. And what I'm speaking of to that is I'm talking about all of my chemical reactions. And this is genetic. Your chemical reactions are basically governed by your genetics. And when you hear about somebody who has a very fast metabolism, they tend to burn through their food relatively quickly, and they lose weight relatively quickly. That is a genetic thing. It is because your chemical reactions are governed by how well your enzymes work, and your enzymes are governed by your genetics, your DNA. They're created by your DNA. So a metabolic pathway begins with a specific molecule and ends with a specific product, and each one of these steps is catalyzed by a specific enzyme as a result. So when we say that it is your metabolism is genetic, that is the reason why, is because your enzymes. Okay, some people might have enzymes that work better. Some people might have more enzymes. Some people might have more efficient enzymes. So it's these enzymes that help the chemical reactions of your body work more appropriately. Okay? And so a metabolic pathway is what you have pictured in front of you. This is a metabolic pathway. This is a series of chemical reactions that occur, starting with one reactant molecule A, which turns into some molecule B after one chemical reaction, which turns into some molecule C after a second chemical reaction, and then some product D after another chemical reaction. And each one of these steps is catalyzed by a specific proteinaceous enzyme. That means an enzyme which is a protein. Okay? So part of what we're going to talk about in this chapter is how these enzymes facilitate these chemical reactions. That will probably be in the third video. Okay? Now, these different metabolic pathways are two different types of metabolic pathways. There are metabolic pathways that release energy by breaking down complex molecules into smaller things. These are called catabolic pathways. Okay? And then there are different metabolic pathways called anabolic pathways that consume energy to build more complex things. Now, oftentimes these two different pathways work with each other. Oftentimes the energy that is released from a catabolic pathway can be used to drive an anabolic pathway. Okay? Now, I always, this is one of those things where I always have trouble. Okay, which one's which? I can't remember which one's catabolic and which one's anabolic. Well, I've got something that will hopefully burn into your memory. Okay, and I've chosen this guy for a reason. There he is. Look at that steroid freak show there. I think this has been, he's obviously been chemically enhanced here, but I think it's been Photoshop enhanced as well for maximum dramatic effect. But when you hear about bodybuilders who, look kind of like that guy, you hear about a chemical that they take called an anabolic steroid, right? Anabolic steroids. And these anabolic steroids are used to build these massive muscles on this guy, right? And so that kind of correlates to what an anabolic pathway would do, okay? You're building more complex molecules from simpler ones, right? Same way that he builds much more complex muscle structures than most people when he uses anabolic steroids. So you have that guy burned into your brain, steroid freak show there, burned into your brain to help you remember the difference between an anabolic pathway and a catabolic pathway. All right, now these pathways are subject to the laws of energy transformation, okay, oftentimes known as the laws of thermodynamics. And in this field of thermodynamics, the terms system and surroundings are used very often. Okay, so I want to make sure that we understand what is the difference between systems and surroundings, because I will also use those terms when discussing different aspects of metabolic function. Okay, so the system refers to the matter under study. Okay, so what I happen to be looking at and describing under a given circumstance oftentimes is going to be the system. Okay, oftentimes the system is the subject of an experiment. Okay. And the surroundings include everything outside of that system. Okay, now there are two types of systems when we talk about these, and these will become pertinent when we discuss how energy flows. Okay, a closed system is isolated from its surroundings. Okay, an example of this would kind of be like an insulated thermos mug that you'd put coffee in when it's cold out. You look to isolate the coffee inside of this thermos. Okay, so it's a closed system. It's got all this insulation around it in an attempt to isolate it from the cold surrounding that's outside. Okay, and an open system is a system where energy and matter can be transferred between its systems and its surroundings. Now, organisms are examples of open systems, okay? So, and not only just matter, like right now I'm going to, wrong pipe. I'm going to interact with matter. Water is going to go into my system. Like an idiot. From the surroundings, from the cup, and as I breathe out and cough, I'm exchanging the matter that was in me with the surroundings as well. It's going to keep going. There we go. All right, so now that we've kind of laid out the difference between systems and surroundings, we can kind of get into the discussion of different forms of energy that might be transferred between systems, okay? Now, I'm just going to kind of gloss over this stuff because I'm pretty sure that you've gotten the difference between kinetic energy and potential energy multiple times between the time you started school and taking my class now. Kinetic energy is the energy associated with motion. Oftentimes we think of this as heat, or if I was to, wad this up and throw it, that little gum wrapper has kinetic energy after I throw it. Right now, sitting on my computer, that gum wrapper thing has potential energy. And then I can transfer that and turn it into kinetic energy. Okay, and we'll talk about energy transfer in a minute. Potential energy is the energy matter possesses because of its location or its structure. Now, there's different types of potential energy. An example provided here is chemical potential energy, because there is energy available for release in a chemical reaction in a certain type of chemical. And so these different energies can be converted from one form to another. Kinetic energy can go to potential, and potential can go to kinetic, regardless of what form the potential energy happens to be in. Okay? So, for instance, I probably should get a different picture. I don't really like this one, but the book provided it, so I might as well use it. This kid right here has potential energy, right? He's kind of just standing there on a platform above the water. This guy who has decided to dive off the thing has transferred his potential energy into kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion, right? And so this kind of goes into this first law of thermodynamics, which states that the energy of the universe is constant. And this means that energy can never be created or destroyed. If the energy of the universe is constant, it means that we've always had the same amount of energy, and we're never going to be able to make more energy or destroy the energy that's there. I can't take some energy packet and smash it in between my finger and then it's gone forever. That's not how it works, okay? The way it does work is this means that energy can be transferred or transformed between one form and another. Okay, so if I had a little energy packet right here that's just sitting there, that might be in the form of potential energy, for instance. But if I go ahead and smash it like this and release that, I've changed that energy into heat energy, which is a form of kinetic, right? By making friction between my thumb and forefinger. Okay? So this is also known as the conservation of energy, the principle of conservation of energy. Energy can be conserved and changed from one form to another, but can never be created or destroyed. So in this previous picture that we saw here, this guy standing on top has potential energy, and as he jumps off, he will have kinetic energy. It is transferring from one form to another. If we go back even further, oftentimes potential energy is transferred to kinetic energy, and kinetic energy can be transferred to potential energy depending on what you do with it. Okay? So this field of thermodynamics is described in two laws. The first one, the first law of thermodynamics, is basically the principle of the conservation of energy. Now we can see this. Actually, we can't really see it, but we can describe this conversion of energy forms when discussing how you use your hair dryer in the morning. Okay, some people might use one. I've had guys and girls use one. So if you've used one in the past, this is kind of what happens in the release of energy in your hair dryer. Okay, and so maybe have a healthy respect for the hair dryer once you see me go through this. All right, so I'm going to take a snapshot of this, and I'm going to draw on it. Okay, and so hopefully you guys are watching because I would like you to interact with me in the next time we have an online meeting, and it's going to revolve around this particular diagram, kind of a check to see that you've done your watching. Okay. So up here, we've got different steps. Each one of these pictures represents a different form of energy. Okay, so this picture right here is a picture of an oil derrick out in the middle of the ocean, and it represents potential energy. Okay, specifically, it represents chemical potential energy. Okay, it pulls up oil from the ground, right? And so we take this oil from the ground and we bring it to the power plant. And at the power plant, how am I going to do this? Let's do blue. At the power plant, oftentimes we burn that chemical energy. Okay, and this transforms the energy into kinetic energy, which is oftentimes when we see flames and heat and things like this, we can think of molecules in motion. And we transform this chemical energy from the oil derrick to kinetic energy in the form of heat or fire. Specifically, okay, if we want to say like a specific form of kinetic energy, we can call this thermal energy or even light energy. Okay, the energy of light or the energy of heat. So this is kinetic energy. This heat is used to boil water, oftentimes at a lot of different types of power plants. It's used to boil water, okay? And so this is also a form of kinetic energy in terms of the motion of, that didn't translate well, in terms of the motion of the molecules of the water, both the liquid forms and the gaseous forms. And in this case, the gaseous forms, the steam coming off the top, is molecular motion of water. And that's the motion that we're actually interested in, because it is that molecular motion, the steam, which will then transmit or transfer into this. This is called a turbine, okay? And so this picture down here represents a turbine. I'm going to use orange and see if that works any better. And those of you who have taken physics and paid attention or gotten to this information already will know that a turbine represents mechanical energy. So we're transferring this kinetic energy in the form of steam molecular motion into mechanical energy. And what this means is that the turbine is going to spin, almost like you'd see on like the jet, they call it a turbine, on the wing of a jet. Okay, and a mechanical energy is actually a mixture of kinetic energy and potential energy. Okay, so that is another form of energy that we're seeing here. Now, when the turbine spins, like you would see this thing eventually spin, it spins because of the steam moving through it. We will have a new type of energy transfer, which would be the transfer into electrical energy. Electrical energy here. And electrical energy is a form of kinetic energy. It is kinetic energy in the form of the movement of electrons. Okay, so that is electrical energy. So we send that electrical energy through some wires, right, that we see on the side of the road, and it goes to your house, and it goes into the wall. You know what's plugged into the wall? The hair dryer. And we're going to have some more energy conversions. So we have electrical energy going into the hair dryer, and the hair dryer is going to convert that into different types of energy as well. Here in the motor, we've got more mechanical energy. So there'd be a conversion of electrical energy to mechanical energy here in the hair dryer. we'd have some stuff come out the front here, would be heat or thermal energy, which is a form of kinetic energy. If you've ever used a hairdryer, we know that they are very loud, right? So we have sound waves, which is a form of kinetic energy. Okay, it moves the air around us. If you've ever stared down the barrel of a hot hairdryer, you notice that there's light energy, which again is a form of kinetic. Okay. So, and we get the just plain old kinetic energy coming out of the tip when it moves the air, right? It blows the air. So we have these different energy conversions from all the way from when we get the oil out of the oil barge, and we bring it to the place to burn it, to make steam, to spin a turbine, to send electrical energy through a wire to your hairdresser. We get all these different energy conversions just to turn on and dry your hair in the morning. Okay, so have a healthy respect for your hairdryer and the fact that it still works and the way that it does work, because it uses this phenomenon of energy conversion to blow dry your hair in the morning. Okay, the second law of thermodynamics is much more convoluted. It is much more difficult to understand because it is very abstract. Okay, but the second law of thermodynamics states that every energy transfer, which we just talked about, increases the entropy of the universe. It increases the disorder of the universe. Okay? And so how do we measure the disorder of the universe? Oftentimes the disorder of the universe is measured in heat. Okay? We're not going to get into the measurement of entropy, but what you do have to understand is that when we transfer energy from one form to another, we lose some of that energy as heat. And in fact, that's a lot of the times what happens in the human body. It's one of the reasons that we have a constant temperature, is that our chemical reactions lose energy of reaction as heat, and we use it to keep our bodies warm. Okay? The chemical reactions that take place in our bodies, or the chemical reactions that take place, for instance, in an automobile, are not 100% efficient. In fact, they're quite inefficient. I believe the conversion of ATP to usable energy is like 40%. You get 40% of the actual energy in ATP that can be translated into usable energy for your body. That's actually really good compared to like an automobile. The automobile's only got 25% energy transmission, okay? Where you actually have, when you burn the gas in the car, only 25% of the energy in that gasoline is transferred into actual motion of the car. The rest is just lost as heat. If you've ever opened your hood after you've kept the engine on for a while, that thing's hot. You can't even touch it. Okay, so massive amounts of heat are actually lost because that process, that energy transfer, is not 100% efficient. Okay, and so the second law of thermodynamics describes this, and this heat energy that's lost helps to increase the disorder of the universe. Okay, and so living cells unavoidably convert these organized forms of energy to heat. For instance, we take glucose, which is a highly organized molecule, and we transfer it into energy, but we inevitably lose some of that energy as heat, the same way a car does. Okay, and that heat goes to increasing the disorder of the universe. Now, the question that's stated here, and this is one of the things I'm pretty sure the College Board still kind of wants you to know. If there is an unstoppable trend towards the randomization of the universe as a whole, how do we as organisms follow the second law of thermodynamics? That's a really good question, because the second law of thermodynamics states that every time there's a transfer or transference or transformation of energy, which is basically all the time in the universe, the disorder of the universe has to increase. Okay? So that seems weird, right? So why are we still here? If every time we breathe or if every time we eat sugar and we break it down, how are we as human beings here if the entropy of the universe is supposed to continuously increase? Okay, that's what the second law of thermodynamics states, and as far as we know, that law still has not been broken. Okay, it has been stretched. Okay, cells create ordered structures from much less ordered materials, right? Think about that, right? We take in material, raw materials, and we turn it into muscles, right? We take raw materials that are much smaller and unordered, and we turn them into bones or eyes or skin. And we see this really highly structured, organized being that's talking to you through a highly organized, structured computer, right? But the second law of thermodynamics states that the entropy of the universe needs to increase. Okay, the disorder of the universe will increase. In fact, sometimes the disorder of the universe is something that's really, really hard to stop. Okay? For instance, I live in a house with 3 little boys that are all 10 and under. And they, like this morning at 6:15, they're running around hitting each other with their stuffed animals. I don't know. And when they do that, me and their mom cleaned up the entire downstairs last night after they went to bed. It was organized. It was ordered. I put it in order here. Everything had its own place and vacuumed, and it looked great. And in 15 minutes, they come down, and it is just complete disorder. It can't be stopped. It can't be stopped. Even if they weren't there, let's say they moved out, it would take me and my wife's energy to keep everything in order. Things just naturally kind of go to random. They go to crap randomly, as if 2020 hasn't showed us that enough already. So how is it that we, as human beings, and the things like that we work with, like this computer right here, how is it that we are allowed to be here? Okay, how are we breaking this law of thermodynamics? It does not, in fact, violate the second law of thermodynamics. These, us as very complex organisms, does not violate that law. Organisms also replace ordered forms of matter and energy with less ordered forms. So think about our existence. So as human beings, we naturally want to think about our existence. We are very egotistical. Even the most outgoing and selfless person has some ego to them. Okay, especially nowadays, I hear a lot about you've got to take care of yourself first. Take care of number one. If I'm not happy, nobody's happy. That type of stuff. Okay, but that's more just human beings. I'm talking about larger picture, right? Let's look outside of what we are. On my way to school today, I drove 22 miles from my house in Leroy to Bloomington. Okay, I increased the disorder of this universe far more than my ordered form would care to. Okay, I put a bunch of pollution out into the air. I drove my car, and the heat from the engine caused the molecules around it to become much more scattered and disordered. Okay, I pulling out of my driveway. I have a gravel driveway, skidded my tires and increased the disorder there. I didn't go all the way onto the road. I kind of went through my yard, and I smashed some grass in my yard. Okay, I spilled some of my coffee this morning. Okay, all of these little things that we do on a daily basis, they work to increase the disorder. Okay, they work to increase the disorder, even though me, myself, and I are very ordered forms of matter. Okay, the entropy of an organism may decrease as long as the total entropy of the universe increases. So when we're talking about this increase of the entropy, we need to think about the entire universe as a whole. And human beings, even though we are ordered forms of matter, are really good at increasing disorder, right? You just look at the world around us. We've made it go to crap real quick. Okay, even space. If you take a look at the orbit around Earth and think to yourselves, you know, Sputnik was the first satellite in space 60 or 70 years ago, right? And now all of a sudden you can't look anywhere around our immediate orbit without seeing a satellite. Like it looks like space junk everywhere, okay? We've increased the disorder out there as well. So there is room in the universe for ordered forms of energy or ordered forms of matter, as long as the ultimate entropy of the universe increases. The ultimate disorder of the universe increases as a result. So in a way, you could say that we are allowed to exist as long as we increase the disorder of the universe, which we're happy to do. Okay? I know that's a very kind of convoluted thing, and it's something that I'm hoping somebody will ask about, and it may be something that I spend a little bit more in-person time talking about. Okay? This idea of the second law of thermodynamics. All right, so that'll do it for the first video, and the next video is going to get into a further discussion of energy and how we can see energy flow between systems.